All right. I will be completely honest. I like the old music better. But we did get some new music. So we got some new introductory music. And so that means that time is moving forward, just in case you're in the future and you're shuffling through these different podcast episodes, maybe while you're driving to events. Anyway, today we have a great show. It is field awareness in both the melee and the list field. And we have some wonderful guests today. I see two of the three of you. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, this one at the top right here.
I'm Viscount Tristan. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, a very familiar face. And then the one right below me.
I am Louis from Mid-Realm.
Okay, Louis from the Mid-Realm. And is Brandon's going to join us? He literally was like right here. Did he have some audio issues?
Yeah, he was having a little bit of technical difficulty, so he may probably be with us in a moment. And we have hosting, or rather doing our production tonight, Sir Sivert. So thank you very much, Sir Sivert, for doing our behind-the-scenes work tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we can kind of, I guess, get started. The way we're going to break this up is to talk about the singles combat version of controlling your area. In boxing, they often call this ring craft, which is how do you control the ring, or in our case, the list field. And that is, via, of course, the catchword that everybody's heard, footwork. But tonight we're really going to break down what is the footwork used to do in order to control, put pressure on your opponent, limit his options or her options in terms of where they are in the list field, how to apply the pressure, how to control it so that you have options and you're limiting the options of your opponent. We've got a couple of videos to show you, to illustrate a few of these points, some great stuff. We're going to post up links in the chat for the video so you can go and watch those, but we are actually going to bring them up here and show a few, some really good stuff for how to look at controlling a list field. And we've got some parallel points as well in regarding maneuvering and taking control of the area in the field. And then, like I said, limiting your opponent's options. So, Louis, do you have anything to add in as we get going here?
No, but just to give a little intro to it, we're also going to talk a little bit about melee in field awareness and how to understand and read the field and how to keep your eyes open while you are working with what is happening in front of you.
Absolutely true. A big part of this is, and this is going to come up repeatedly, is vision, knowing kind of what to look for, what to keep your eyes open for. The principles are the same, whether it's the single field or the melee field, but the application feels different because you've got such a larger scale you're dealing with. And of course, in a single fight, you don't have somebody running up behind you or beside you and trying to distract you or engage you. So. We're going to do the singles part first, then we'll move on to the melee side.
Hey, can I add my 2 cents on here real quick?
Yeah, please.
So, and as I kind of hinted to you guys earlier, this is not something that I consider myself an expert on. In fact, I consider myself far from an expert of this in the singles context. And actually, I would consider myself, at least for whatever I am good at, I think I'm particularly good at this in the melee. I mean, I don't know if I'm better than anyone on this call, but it's certainly one of the things that I'm better at than other things. But with that, I had a comment. Like any skill, the more you work at it, it's not even so much that you might directly apply it. Like in some cases, you might actually directly apply it. But the better you learn it, the more it goes kind of into the back of your head where it becomes automatic. And it's one less thing you have to think about. And just as an example, this isn't a footwork situation, but I was in oh my God, I keep getting these alerts. Sorry. We did a practice tournament at our practice yesterday, and I've got some things I'm working on. And I remember I was thinking, I have to hold my hand a certain way on my sword. I need to hold my hand higher than I'm used to holding it. I need to keep my posture up, keep my feet together, keep my elbow in. And as I did all that, the shot that took me out of the tournament was I threw my left-handed wrap and my right hand is supposed to be up in my head and it was down by my waist because I just had too many things in my head to think about. So I think things like this, like you said, like learning ring control or footwork or whatever, if you practice it, it's just it goes more into the automatic like part of your fighting.
Yep, it does.
Who just joined us? Who's that?
I don't know. I think I might know something about this, anyways. At least I'm hoping. I'll apologize to everyone. I can tell, or if you guys have a hard time hearing me, I'm on a Bluetooth headphone and I'm having some issues. So hopefully I don't lose you all. But looking forward to a great conversation today.
Yeah, never upgrade technology. It just always goes bad. I'm still on a rotary phone.
Yes, I need an IT person since I'm no longer in IT.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know how much of the intro you caught, Brandis, but did you have anything you want to add? Introductory stuff on the ring control, singles.
Well,
situational awareness?
it's so I think in the key about situational awareness is I kind of dove in pretty hard earlier today and actually learned a couple things. I was pretty happy about, kind of thinking about. A lot of other things came in place, but they put a different terminology around them. I think one big piece, and this not only goes for the tournament field, but also for the melee field, is, the first evaluations even before the fight starts. And that really is, how big is the area that you're fighting in a tournament? Obviously could be, you have a 10 by 10, very small list. It could be that you have a giant field, no list at all, so you can wander. So each of those present a different opportunity, but you have to understand what opportunities it presents before you actually go in, and start fighting and then try to figure it out then. You have early diagnostics of what's going to happen. You don't want to go out onto a field and find out, hey, the grass is really high and slowing me down. I'm having trouble moving, or hey, I'm on cement, my shoes are sliding. All of a sudden, you have two totally different situations, but you don't want to find that out when somebody's throwing a blow at you. You want to find that out. You want to look, you get a chance, test it, see how the field is working, and even the condition. If it's rainy, is it muddy? I know at Penzic, sometimes it gets really hot and you get hay on the field or dry grass on the field. It becomes very slippery. And those are the things I always look for even before I go out there. I'm like, before I take a big long jump, if the floor is slippery, I take smaller ones. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about even before you get out on the field. And in melee, you want to take a look at, what am I working with? What is in front of me? And then you start working on, like, what's a field like? What, is it hilly? Is there areas you can't use? All of those kinds of things. So think about those early things you can do even before we get into the next piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we're trying to figure out how to get up the video on SCA Coach's Corner. I think
That's
we got
okay. Actually, I wanted to toss in something too, because the concept of what is the size of your list field for a one-on-one fight is very relevant. And yes, there are small ones from 10 by 10 up to some really massive ones. And sometimes I know up here, Northshield will do like a crown tournament where we'll split a big field into 4 lists. They'll start out with one-on-ones in smaller fields. Then as the number of combatants gets pared down, they'll cut them to 2 list fields, which get bigger. And then at the end, they'll cut it down to 1 big list field. So now even the constraints you had early rounds are different than later rounds. But the one fundamental that is consistent, for example, with chess, is it's acknowledged that if you control the center of the board, you have an advantageous position. And we're going to talk about that as it gets to Ringcraft. And in this video that they're the behind the scenes working on getting up and going will show that the one who's really controlling the footwork and the maneuvering has controlled the center of the ring. And this would translate to SCA fighting, for example, rather than starting a fight, when the marshals say, do your salutes and whatnot, you're not back up, far away, closer to the edge of the list field than you are to the center. Some people like starting their fights out, 10 paces apart and then approaching each other. Other fighters, and I know that there's a Duke in the mid-round dog who loves starting out right in the middle of the field. He'll walk right up if you start as close, you're almost in sword range when they call lay on, for the simple reason he likes controlling the center of the list.
Mhm.
And when you are in the center, and you'll see this coming up in the boxing footage that we're about to show, if you're at or near the center of the ring, if you need to back up, you can. If you need to go sideways, you can. You can go either side, either direction. You can cut, you can turn, all of those things. And what you'll see for the opponent who's up near the ropes, he can't go back anymore. His options are limited. He can really go side to side. He can come forward. And this is about applying pressure. And I know Bronis has got a ton to say about applying pressure, so I'll let him do his special thing with that. But think about that, about controlling the center of the ring. When you are in the center, you have every option available to you. And that's what we want to do, is have options available to us and limit the options that our opponent has.
Hey, Tristan, I want to jump in real quick.
Sure.
A friend of mine and I had a practice a couple of years ago. This is right before I think the two of us got knighted, or maybe right around after I got knighted and before he did. And we were training for Burka. So if anyone doesn't know Burka, it is a bear pit tournament. It's in a 10x10 box.
Mhm.
And we didn't have anybody really had any experience with it at our local practice. And so we're kind of figuring out our own. I remember one time I videoed and I noticed between the two of us, we were very evenly matched, and almost every fight, whoever took the center of the ring won the fight. And that was without applying any sort of knowledge of where to place their feet versus that person's feet or anything. What happened was the person that backed to the corner, just they lost the ability to sidestep or pivot and attack, and they were just done. And again, it wasn't like the attacker didn't know that's what was happening. We were just in a naturally advantageous position versus a disadvantageous position.
Did
So,
you notice anything about the change in attitude that the fighters had, whether they were in the center of the ring or near the edge?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really was like you had it was basically the wolf with the eyes in the front of the face and the prey with the eyes on the side. It really was. It really, like, one pretty much set themselves up as the predator,
Sure.
and the other was the prey. Yeah, we definitely noticed that.
Well, and one of the things that I've always noticed, and I when I was looking through the video that we're about to show, which covers the boxing thing, there's something about boxers that's a little different than SCA fighters. One is the way that they fight. They don't get caught up in the ropes or in the ring ropes. Whereas somebody who's fighting with a sword or medieval weapon, it can very easily, as you swing back, that rope can get caught on your sword, and it can create mayhem. So what I noticed is that when I see boxers back up to the ring, they'll even feel it with their back, or they know when they're close to it, and they can side slip, but they're not worried about the rope interfering with their weapon. Whereas I've seen plenty of sword fighters and SCA fighters that actually get caught in the ropes and tangled up, which means as they start getting backed up, if they have enough experience to know they're getting close to the ropes, they can't turn and look because they're going to get hit. But when they start feeling that pressure, they start panicking, thinking that, wow, if I swing or if I do a weapon recovery, I can catch a rope and that'll just screw everything up. It's very disconcerting. And so I used to actually like to do this, is I would stalk an opponent and get him close to the ropes, and I would watch his eyes just to see if they started to panic. And then I would sort of let them sit there for a couple of moments as they're worried about, I could tell they're not worried. They're not thinking about the fight. They're thinking about not getting caught in the ropes. And so again, that's like being in the center of the ring. That is slight advantage. Now, it didn't make everybody come unglued or even nervous, but it's worth, probing your opponent to see if they do get nervous, if they get backed up like that.
I think let's go ahead and let's shoot to the video real quick, because I think there's a lot to cover, and we're already 15 minutes in. So great part about this.
Before we start on this, I just
Okay,
wanted to get a little bit of a lead in. We really like, the coaches that we looked over this really like this video. It's silent. All of the instruction is in text, but it is really clear to see how the maneuvering is going, the footwork that's being used to maneuver it, and they'll pause it and call it out. So you're going to see a lot of parallels with how to maneuver that applies completely to SCA combat, even the pressure and whatnot that's put on. And they also cover what not to do, like different steps and way not to get trapped or lead into things that are going to take you off in a bad direction. So go ahead, Bronis. I just wanted to pop that in there.
All right. So one nice thing about this video is this is a great thing. You can see right here at the beginning, they talk about, as your opponent moves, you move, and not, if they slide in this case, he's sliding to the right, you slide to the left, and you're staying even. You can really see it here. You're always tracking your opponent. The key is, if your opponent's moving to the right, or in this case, to the left, your right foot has to move. And then opposite the other way. You cannot do it the other way. Otherwise, you create an opening for them to slide around. You can see when they get into the corners, there's a little bit of a pivot. So here, as what's happening is he's still controlling the center of the ring here, but then in the corner, he just has to pivot because you're not actually moving. You're just changing an angle. So
and think about it this.
Here's real question. Here's a chase. And this is what happens when you just get in front of them. You notice they're both on the rope. So that's the idea. Okay, pause it real quick so we can talk about it for a second.
Yeah, just rewind it a little bit and keep it on it still. The boxer that's in the center, look at how, because this is just geometry, how little he has to move to keep on a smaller circle than the guy on the outside who's got to travel a very big circle. So if you're looking in terms of energy expenditure, who's expending more energy going around their circle? The guy who's in the center is spending less energy than the guy on the outside. And this definitely applies. Now, these guys are boxers. They're wearing maybe 1.5 pounds worth of clothing, as opposed to an armored fighter that's wearing maybe 40 pounds in addition to their body weight. So, and this is also a closer range than SCA fighting. The circles would be even bigger for the guy on the outside. So you're making him move a lot more. So just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, and this is something I do all the time. I'm always pressing, taking space, and we'll talk about what taking space means. But the idea here is, you notice the guy in the middle has the ability to move forward and backwards really without thought, because he has room to move backwards a little bit. The guy that's on the rope, he has less options than the other guy has. He can't move back, otherwise he gets caught on that rope. So, the idea here is you're taking people's options away, and that's a big part of essentially controlling the list. All right, in this one, let's go to, I'm not going to do the L step because that's a little more advanced, but let's go to fakes at 213. So here is the idea of, a couple of things are happening here. There's a lot of mental pressure when you get into the corner. You're provoking your opponent a little bit, and you're creating vulnerabilities in the fight. And especially when you can start adding fakes. You can see if he's adding a little bit of a glove fake or an arm fake to get his opponent. You see his opponent raise his hands. So in our game, that if I fake a little bit high, and a person raises his shield, then I have opportunities. This is the idea of being able to find opportunities. Go ahead and stop it for a second. The idea is that as you're putting this fake on somebody, you're bringing up their stress or anxiety. You're bringing up their energy inside their body. There's a lot of pressure going on. A lot of people, I kind of started doing the pressure game back after Lomachenko, and I started digging into Eastern European boxing. Here's a simple example of pressure being on that rope. He is actually, that fighter he's losing options. He is now fighting defensively, right? Which is poor, because now his opponent is starting to use some fakes to start breaking him down. We're going to go through some other fakes here. Here he's doing a step fake. I do a kind of a stomp fake the same way. It builds pressure in your opponent. He wants to drop back, and he can't. So here he goes. He did a little double step fake here. He's just closing range and then getting back out. Closing range, getting back out. And you can see how this is just a simple bounce fake. A lot of boxers use this bounce. They also call it slide. But we use it a little bit, but not a lot. Okay.
Hey, Brandis, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah. Mhm.
So, and this probably go to, I mean, okay, so the average SCA fighter is about 6 feet tall.
Yep.
You and Louis are below that, and Tristan is significantly above that. And my question here is, let's consider Joe Frazier versus Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
So what's the perspective? And I think about myself. Like, for
So-
example, I fought someone last night who's he's probably like 5'11", and a very aggressive A-range fighter. I'm 6'3", and
You want the range.
yeah, like I would take the center if he would give it to me, but more often than not, I'm this guy with the back to the camera who's like trying to dance around the outside. So
Right.
what would you do from that perspective?
So, and you can see that a little bit with Muhammad Ali. He tended to, he took the center when he could, but he tended to lean on the ropes and get the head out, guard low, a little bit of that, Floyd Mayweather shoulder, just kind of blocking that head and low guard, right? He can pick up stuff while he's leaning against the ropes. This is another example of analyzing your field. If you've got a small list, and that's conducive to a smaller fighter. If you have a large list, that's conducive to the taller fighter or the range fighter. So, this is for Barry. This is you're going to walk in and go, "Woo, this is going to be fun. This person's going to come right at me." Key is, if he's coming at you, you have escapes on either side.
Okay.
I tell you, I'll go test people, and the first thing I look at is if they move laterally with me. If they do not move laterally with me, I probably know that their footwork isn't the greatest at the game in time. And then when somebody does move laterally with me, I'm like, this is going to be a fight. Because now I got a person that knows how to use it. So if he's running right at you, actually, that person tends to be in a weaker spot because you get the first opportunity to throw and control range, essentially the first part of the controlling range. After he's on you, then there's other options you're going to have to do. But you have escape mechanisms either right or left. The key is to practice those escape mechanisms enough that they become natural. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I was thinking also with respect to it's particularly like Muhammad Ali, who also had a really good jab. And so, like you said, like you're putting pressure on somebody. He's also applying pressure to them, but through using that jab. And a fight that jumps out to me in mind, or jumps into my mind, is Last Penzic, Fox, who's not particularly short, but he's shorter than Duke Edward. The Fox versus Duke Edward heroics fight, where Fox kept trying to close. Edward didn't want to let him close, and Edward made sure that he kept throwing like dangerous shots at him to try to stall him.
So that's the idea. That's where the jab comes from. You want to throw something, fake something to make your opponent think. If you look at some of these really good pressure fighters, they're going to walk through that. They ignore it and walk through it. Very hard to be able to do that. But you want to make your opponent think. If you smack a sword, you're essentially pinning that sword and can roll to that side, essentially roll out of that really rushing range. Some people like Duke Kellick. He's really good. Once he gets on you, he's holding you. He's kind of flowing with you a little bit, but he can stay on you no matter what. Once you're so close, he's very good at not having enough tension in his body that you can freeze him in one spot and go the other way. Mm-hmm. But most people are not that way. Second piece is usually what happens here. And Barry, you can answer this one. Last night, after he threw a bunch of stuff, did he ever stop and want to breathe?
My opponent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So does he go backwards usually? Because people want to get out of range. Why are they breathing and things like that?
No, he
stays in range.
He's been fighting since he's like 14 years old, and it's just like he's been wired to. He's a blood guard fighter, just wired to just keep coming at you.
So the key is as they're driving at you, at the point where you can see them relax a little bit, is at the point you want to move, right? Or you want to crash into them really hard, bump them, and then move on the rebound.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think in a smaller list, the person who ends up in the middle tends to be working harder on the attacking side and control side. And the person who's willing not to, or is not willing enough to do that, ends up becoming more in a defensive.
Yep. pretty much.
One thing I
mean,
wanted to jump into as a taller fighter, and I know this got brought up in one of the forums I was in this last week or two about, the thought that taller fighters have an advantage over shorter fighters. I never felt that when I was facing somebody who was not as tall as I was, that I had an advantage on them. I used to think that when I was younger, thinking, well, I've got longer arms and the reaches, I've got greater range. And that is true. But what I also noticed is that most fighters who are shorter understand that, and they know where that danger buffer is, where they're caught in a range where they can be hit and they don't want to be hit. But what I definitely did notice as being an assessment is who's got the quicker feet, who moves faster with their feet. If I see slow plodding heel toe stepping, I don't care what the range is, because if I can move, if my footwork is better and I can move around more agilely than my opponent can, I'll have a huge advantage. And that one did stay consistent. Granted, there are a few fighters that their footwork is slow, but their hands are incredibly fast, that kind of make up for it. They have a kind of a balance, but generally, if I can outmaneuver somebody, that's where my confidence builds quite a bit. It's not so much about height or reach.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, everybody has a advantage, disadvantage. Actually, Louis, didn't you bring up that somebody did a poll once, and it was surprising, the average for people winning crown were actually on the smaller side.
Yeah, I think, didn't Dog do that like 20 years ago?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if that was part of the poll that Helga had done. I don't recall that stat.
Yeah, I think it was from Dog, like you said, really long time ago. Because it's interesting if you start rolling through fighters and just especially crown winners, you'd be surprised at how many people are about just under 6 foot or so.
Yeah, I think he said that the majority, or the biggest category, was between 5'8" and 6 foot or something like that. Whereas I think everybody expecting when this thing was started that, there's going to be a bunch of 6 foot plus, the giants are going to have the advantage. But it turned out to statistically and I don't recall the breadth. I know he covered as many kingdoms as he could, and he covered as much of a time period as he could, but I don't remember the specifics because it was so long ago.
Okay, I have a little bit of video. I watched this earlier today. This is really old. I apologize, but obviously I was still working on feet. This is, I think it says Viscount Magnus. I believe he was from like Alaska or something like that. Here you can see how I'm constantly moving and pushing his outside corners. And then I give away range, but I take it back, right? I constantly move back into a range, and then I'm always getting back to the edge of range. Let's see how those big steps he's taking forward. That's where I'm trying to trap his legs so that I can shoot stuff like that inside leg on a big step. But you notice how I'm always pushing to the outside. So the reason I'm pushing to the outside is because I'm corralling my opponent. This is no different. It's no Litchfield here, by the way, but the same thing is happening.
Define outside, because you're dealing now with a 2-sword fighter. So when you say outside,
right? Outside each of his, when I usually go outside, it's outside his feet. See, I'll take a step and it'd be outside of a foot. Right there, I'm on the outside of his left foot, or right. Left.
So now are you describing, like, imagine if they're stepping on train tracks and they've got lines going forward from where their feet are. You want to be outside of one of those lines?
Yeah. I tell people all the time, if you take the angles of your feet, those are essentially, put lasers on them that show on the ground. I'm stepping on the outside of the laser.
Right. As if you're wearing skis.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
And if I can stay there, I'll stay there for a while until they adjust, and then I'll go the other way. I'll keep changing that up. There's also rhythm. You can see that I actually have a rhythm here. It's much easier to fight in a rhythm. You notice too, I hardly look like I'm blocking here. It's because I know exactly where I am in distance. I'm letting stuff happen a little bit. Here he hit me with wrap there. He finally got that big wrap there. But the idea is I'm the one, you notice even I'm always kind of walking forward a little bit, taking some opportunity. You see how often he's like settled into the ground?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm creating that because I'm not letting him go on the outside. This is like corralling a bull. Sooner or later, you can actually push that bull back, right? obviously the guy's two sword. He's much bigger than I am, right? And he could obviously push me around if he wants, but in this case, I'm twisting him enough around that he doesn't have. Also, what's happened here is because he's constantly under tension, now he has no breath.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an example in a fight, even without a Litchfield, how these same, go ahead and go back to the other video, how the same things in that other video work, even without, essentially a Litchfield around you. There's hand fakes, there's little step fakes, there's outside step fakes, there's, all of these things to essentially manipulate your opponent, control distance, take away their weapons, i.e. angles with their weapons and throws. When I'm on the outside of the hand, his hand on that sword is actually passing by me instead of through me. So all I have to do is get this angle. It puts his shoulder farther away from me and his other sword not directly on me. So it makes it, when they throw, they're actually throwing inside my line if I'm on the outside of the foot. If I stand in front of him, his right, left shoulders are good. All his angles are right at me. Does that make sense, Barry, if you were fighting two-stick? All right, kids. I am going to go ahead.
You're muted, Barry.
Yeah. Oh, good. I thought it was me.
Barry is still
I
muted.
did that on purpose just to see if you were paying attention.
But am I right, Barry?
Yes. I said you were right like 4 times already.
Well, maybe a few more might work. But
well,
I mean,
one of the other things you talked about too, and this is something that especially as a two-sworder and as a tall person I have to worry about is taking those big steps and momentum changes and stuff like that. So if you can, it's one of the things we talk about with closing a gap on somebody or like a taller person or a rangier person. Mm-hmm. It might be hard to close the gap on them, but if you can get them coming at you, and then as they take a step toward, that's like when you close the gap, you kind of like double the pace you're closing the gap on them.
All right, I think we're rolling into the melee time a little. I just like to cover a couple other things from the video.
Go ahead. Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Let's go to in the video. Let's go to a little bit of head movement. We could talk about the edge, but I'm not. Let's go ahead. Actually, 253. All right. So at 253, there we go. All right. There's where he's essentially just shooting in and out, right? Edge, what he's doing, he's really half steps these. He's putting his hand up and he's taking a half step. The idea is to disorient your fighter, to take a look at what's happening, put tension high, and then your foot underneath you is actually moving ahead a half a step, taking distance away and controlling distance. That's what that one's doing. Head movement. This is a really big one. I use this a lot. I actually pulled this one from something Lars does. And that is head movement disorients your opponent all the time because he has focus. A lot of times they're taking focus. And when you're moving your head, they're following that head movement a little bit. I do an exercise where I'll walk straight at somebody, but I'll move my head to the side. And what happens is they end up shifting their feet side to side instead of walking straight back. So they lose distance really fast. It also is very hard throwing at something that's not there anymore. And if you can slip shots, then you become, here he's hand blocking a little bit. But if you can slip shots, they get very off center and you can slip underneath it and really get bigger angles and scare your opponent, bring their pressure up really high.
That's a fundamental. A moving target is harder to hit than a stationary one.
Yep. That's why after you throw, not only should you recover your sword very fast, but you should shift the angle before you even worry about what you did to your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they do this little zigzag. You guys actually saw me do this in the last video, back and forth into those corners, right? That zigzag puts that person, kind of corrals them onto the, see how he's constantly changing the angles, always corralling his opponent. And then here, I've seen people do this. I'll do this once in a while. I'll put my sword out on their weapon and just control their weapon from farther away, essentially controlling measure. Not big. These, you don't have to worry about these cross steps. Let's go all the way to 720. And I think this was the one we were having a little trouble with because of the way they present it. But Here's
I noticed the boxer seems to be more like a two-sword fighter than a sword and shield. He's throwing with both hands.
Yeah, can you believe that?
I did see a lot of left-handed hooks to the body in there. I kind of like those, like Duke Sven.
Yes. So here, what you can see is the opponent actually escapes out, and now he's holding the. You see how they're both in the center list. Here, this boxer gets right back to the center. He loses the outside. That person is losing the outside. If I just try to chase him, I'll never catch up. So he can take it back into the middle. Here, instead of chasing his opponent, he backs into that middle and then goes back into a control state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, didn't you have before we got on the show, didn't you have like a little graphic about not chasing an opponent around the ring, cutting him off?
Yeah, that was in another video. I think that was, we'll cover this video. Let's go ahead and jump into the melee a little bit. But if we get time at the end, we'll cover the Chavez video and showing a couple of those graphics on how to cut that ring off a little bit.
Okay, yeah, let's cut to the melee. If you guys don't mind, I'll start on this. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is, what is situational awareness in a melee? And I want to kind of talk about maybe broadly what I'm going to be talking about. I actually noticed, I don't know if he's still on, but our Kingdom's General was on earlier, and he does a really good job of training up our fighters on sort of, he does a lot of things, but really focuses on the organizational side and a lot of where do you fit within a unit, how to follow commands, how to give commands, how to identify positions on the field. There's also the perspective from a commander standpoint, which is fascinating. This unit's over here. We need to move our unit this way. I'm not really going to focus a lot on that stuff, although they're all very important. I like to think about it a lot of times from the standpoint of you're an individual and you found yourself in a situation on a field, and how do you sort of read what are good positions or bad positions? So like maybe this doesn't apply specifically if you're, in the third rank on a bridge battle or something like that. And again, very important things, being aware of what's going on around you. And we can talk about that if we want to add that on. But I'm thinking more like you're in a woods battle, you find yourself out on a flank, you're in the Pennsic. I always, for those listening, not locally, I always refer to Pennsic because that's our big event and it is the biggest in the known world. But you're in a battle where you field battle, half your unit got destroyed. Now you have to sort of redeploy. Maybe you're doing the unbelt or the belted battle at Pennsic, where you've got a 30 on 30 or a 40 on 40 or something like that. But like, what are some basic things to recognize and things to think about? So Sivert, can you pull up, I should have called it slide number 1. It is slide number 2. Can you pull up slide number 2 real quickly, please? That's slide number 1. There we go. Slide number 2. So here's an example of, we've got the blue team and we've got the white team. So I want you to, anyone, look at this. I will answer just in case someone gives a wrong answer, but take a minute to look at this and think which team is in the better position situationally.
I'd say
I would say the blue team, right? So the blue team is in a better situation positionally. Obviously, they got the white team surrounded, but the big thing is the blue team, there is no one behind them. All right. Each blue person is on the outside looking in. And we actually had a scenario that we did at our regional practice 2 weeks ago, where without going into too much detail, there was a point in the middle of the field you had to control, and we had some flanks and one team, and then it was unlimited resurrection. So you die, you go back to the resurrection point, you come back in. And we had some really good flankers on one team. So they kill the people on their flank, and then they move into the backfield, and they would forget that people are coming back from the res point. So they would turn their backs to the resurrection point. And so I was trying to show them just sort of how to be more like the blue people in this picture, getting out and controlling the area and trying to make sure that everybody's out in front of you and that people are not getting behind you or out of your periphery. So this is an example of what I would say is situational awareness, is being able to be in that situation, put yourself in a place where you can see everything and don't put yourself into a dangerous place. And as one of my friends said a long time ago, and as he was teaching newer people, how do you recognize a bad situation and get out of it? So in this case, the white fighters are in bad situations. So maybe an example would be, let's look at just the guys on the far right, the 3 white fighters. At some point, they really should pivot out of there and put their backs to, say, the right side of the screen and turn that blue fighter around. And they would have to sort of figure out how to do that together. So that's an example of like, what are you looking for and how to get into those situations.
It's interesting, Barry, because in this case, we have a scenario where we go from controlling the center to actually not getting surrounded and caught in the center, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a very good point. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's something I noticed. I came up as a melee fighter. I was in a melee household. I didn't care about singles hardly at all. Now I care about both probably equally. And I noticed that tourney fighters, when they went into melee, there's a lot of bad habits, or good habits for tourney, but then they would translate it to melee and they wouldn't do very well. Little things like going from focusing maybe on one sword to being able to focus, on lots of things, being able to see the whole field. And actually go to slide number 1, please, Sivrid. And one of the things I talk about as well is identifying if you have the advantage or if you have the disadvantage. In tourney, you're going to go up against, Super Duke, what's his name? And it doesn't matter that you can't beat him. You have no choice. That's your job. You have to get through that round. And if you've got a 1% chance of beating him, you do it. In melee, if you have a 1% chance of beating somebody, you don't engage. You draw them out. You try to tie them up and slow them out. If they are going to kill you, you try to take as long as possible. So yes, on this slide here, so what I have are some examples, and these are actually, both of these were from a real practice we did a couple of years ago. And I watched a lot of video, and I kind of identified some of the things that were going on. So I have some examples here of how do you decide when do you attack versus not attacking. So the very top one there says you have a numbers advantage. So you've ended up on the field somewhere, and we have 2 fighters against 1. So in this case, the 2 blue versus the 1 white. So, and we're going to assume all else is equal. We're going to assume the 2 blue people are not like their first time fighting, and the white person is like, a super, super amazing fighter. So the 2 blue would want to attack. The 1 white wants to drag this out, sort of draw things out. A little bit below them, slightly to the right, you have a positional advantage. So here we see the white fighter is able to hit the blue fighter in the side. So that would be a good time to attack. If you go down a little bit further, here we have the range advantage. So now we've got a spear who's 10 feet away from a shield. Sure, take some shots. Maybe one of them's going to land in there. The next one down to the right, momentum advantage. Maybe they're backing up on their heels. This is a good time that you can sort of charge at them. A little bit below, I have range advantage again, except this time the white has the range advantage because now they've closed inside of that spear, and now they're in belly to belly range, and they want to attack. And the last one I call a big skill advantage. So we try to tell people never fight a one-on-one situation, but the reality is you can't. Then you see a bunch of knights run out there and fight one-on-ones all the time. It's like, well, they're fighting down. They're fighting someone that they're pretty confident they can beat. Maybe they're fighting a person who's in their 3rd melee or something like that. And the reason why I even threw this up there was that a lot of people were getting themselves caught into single situations. They're like, I found a single person out here. Now let's go at it. This is just like our local practice all the time. So any thoughts on this? You guys have anything to add on identifying, so you put yourself in a good position, or you found yourself in a position and now you're sort of identifying, what do I do about this?
I'm going to add on the top situation with the numbers advantage, you can flip it. And if that one person can stack the other 2 and control 2 fighters, then they have produced a numbers advantage elsewhere, possibly.
Yeah, we do a lot of that with the. You're talking about like a 2-on-1 scenario where you roll out to one side and trying to get the other 2 lined up and
correct.
Yeah,
and to sometimes I give that example when you're fighting a 2-sword fighter, and you treat their shoulders like 2 fighters, and you try to stack them a little bit in line.
right.
Then you can control that fighter a little bit better as well.
Yes, nice. And again, and this scales up too. So let's say you have a unit of 5 people and you run into a unit of 3 people. Again, we had this scenario 2 weekends ago. We did field battles about 10 on 10. One team won the first field battle, and what the losing team did that didn't work out was they had pardon me. The losing team had they went with 5 fighters on their right flank, and they were resisted by 3 fighters. And the 3 fighters basically were happy to have the standoff, and the 5 fighters, they ended up not attacking until it was too late. So being able to identify those kinds of things, that gets a little bit more into small teamwork. Let's move on to.
So wait, before we move on, we've got a couple of questions. Couple of questions here. The first one, I'm going to show it up here. Essentially, thinking about field battles quickly become a swirling toilet. It's interesting too, because we talk about we can circle inside of tournament as well, but it's everybody attaching each other's sides there. How does the losing side, when they see a halt in the tide and regain control, how does the losing side essentially change and regain control in that swirling battle? And that was a tough one because momentum is the key in a swirling battle, right?
Right.
The idea is you out of the hold. So this is a big piece. I really love that these are exactly evaluation points in a battle. So think about, I call the hold, and you look at that picture, and Robert, I'm going to get right back to yours. We take a look at this picture. Which one are you? Which one of these guys are you? Next evaluation, if I'm the white guy at numbers advantage, then I don't want to attack these people because I am at disadvantage. I want to drag this out. I want to work on making sure they don't leave me so that other people can win. Or I want to work on, like Louis said earlier, lining them up so only one person can attack me at a side. Let's say I'm the person over momentum advantage, and I'm the white person. If the other guy's going backwards, I have the control. So here, I just want to keep that other guy going backwards, attack their sides, maybe try to get onto the side so you can throw a wrap. The big piece here is don't let that go away. But if you're way off the field, away from people, or he creates a distance, there may be a time when you have to break off. But these are the evaluations that you have to make. You make those evaluations very easy. The easiest part to make these evaluations, and this is the same thing for the circling piece, is a hold is called. Don't sit there and it's like, okay, a hold's called. You're just sitting there, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking around. I'm not paying attention. And then a lay-on's called and I'm evaluating the field. Too late.
Are you guys allowed to evaluate the field during a hold in the mid-realm?
We can't talk.
That is,
you're allowed to look. The field. Yeah, we're allowed to look.
No, in the East is considered
close your eyes.
It's unchivalrous to have your eyes
close
open.
your eyes, right? Yes.
I gotta. By the way, sorry, I forgot. We're gonna be allies this year, so maybe I shouldn't.
But I mean, that's the key here is know when to do these things. And Louis, you can cover this one. When you're on the field before the battle, you're looking across the battlefield, evaluating the battlefield. We already evaluated the terrain, the edges, all of that piece, how big it was. Now we evaluate the people on the other side. If I see Barry all by himself on the left corner,
it's a trick.
It's a trick, right? Or whatever, right? But if I see a giant unit on the right corner, well, maybe we had something different happening. But there's an evaluation occurring, right?
Yeah, and so to answer John's question, it's so obviously all this stuff scales. Yeah, so there's
totally missed it.
What's that?
I said I totally missed answering. I jumped over it. I apologize, Robert.
Sorry, Robert. If there's a so this all scales. So if you have a giant, let's say a big unit of 30, you can accomplish certain things, but you're going to move it slower. If you have a small unit of 5, you can do something a little bit bigger or a little bit faster. If it's just yourself, you can do a lot more. Now, if it's just yourself, like one person in the context of like 500 or 500, there's only so much effect you can make. But if we're talking about 10 on 10, you could probably have a pretty big effect. But so to contrast what we talk about the ring control, a lot of this is trying to maintain that outside position. And if they won't give it to you, or if they deny it, then drawing it into a corner. So if we look at the screen right now and just look at the rectangle and just pretend that this is a lot of stuff's going on. So usually the losing side is going to be your left side. It's because we live in a right-handed world. It's a real thing. It's not something we just decided happens. The toilet bowl almost always goes counterclockwise, right? It's the right flanks are pushing. If you're way outmatched, then both sides fold, and you're just going to lose anyway. But if you're kind of competitive, their right side's going to swirl, your right side's going to swirl in their backfield, and then you're just hoping that your right side does it faster than their right side does. So basically what we're talking about is if you're on the left side and you're losing, what do you do? And I would say generally continue to fade to the left until you get to the border. And if they don't allow you, if that doesn't stop them, and then you start fading back into the corner, and if the battle's still going on. And so basically you're kind of doing what Muhammad Ali does in the ring is you're dancing around the outside of the ring, but generally it's to your left and then back and then counterclockwise. And you're just trying to slow the bleeding as much as possible. And I remember an actual event that I had, probably goes back like 2015. It was, we were facing Bloodguard was pretty strong back then. Our unit of fledgling skirmishers were across from Bloodguard. It was like maybe a 20-on-20 or 30-on-30 fight, and they did a really hard push and a charge on their right side, and we ran backwards and circled that whole field. And by the time we got all the way back, we were fortunate enough that everyone else on their team had died by that point. And then we ended up winning that battle. Because we knew we couldn't stop them. You know, it was like 12 Bloodguard shields versus like 7, pole arms and spears and maybe 2 shields on our side. So we just basically said, we can't stop this. So let's get them chasing us.
So I'll add a little bit to that. On that leading edge of the swirl, usually the people on the outside are moving quick, have high momentum. The people on the inside, it's a little bit of a surprise on them because things are changing. What they were fighting that's in front of them is now beside them, and they're turning. And that constant turn is what really keeps that swirl going. And to break that unit would have to observe it earlier and draw it out.
Yeah.
Basically, get all their fighters in that area to push outward and try to kill that momentum.
Yeah, and that gets kind of into the more organizational stuff. Do you have a reserve unit? Do you have backfield, security force to kind of see that and evaluate and move? I would say that's a little bit more of an advanced fighter, but yeah, that's absolutely true. Can we cut
before you're done? The other thing, 2 things you can do is when you have a swirl, once the momentum stops, they have to regain momentum. The key on sometimes regaining momentum is essentially hit them really hard fast to stop them and then retreat. What that usually does is it kind of holds everybody for a second with the surprise. The retreat gives you distance, and then you can control distance. If you keep one side next to the sideline, they can't actually overrun that side. That keeps that side safe, so you only have to worry about one other side. There's a number of ways to try to help that, but the key is to slow that momentum. We did this at a Pennsic. In fact, we have a rule about it now. I had asked when I was commanding, I'd asked our king what part of the field was ours before we started up. This was common for the East to run the big, horns of the bull type of scenarios. So once they had a ton of field, we all started in the back corner or in the back edges of the field, and we all ran out. All that momentum's happening. So I moved our whole unit to midfield. And there was a lot of unhappy people because we didn't use all the field, and that momentum couldn't actually get going. We actually won that battle. Then they created
then
after being called a cheater a lot, next year they set thirds of the field. In other words, you could take your third, they can take their third type of deal.
Okay.
So, but that stopped the momentum because we were closer. So it was harder for them to get that kind of push through because they couldn't line it up long enough.
So let me get back into how do we train this, and again, the perspective here is brand new fighters with 1 to 5 years. I mean, you can do this for any level, but even for like a brand new fighter, just to like, how do we get on the field and what's going around? And to give you a little bit of perspective for myself, I remember I fought for about 10 years, kind of casually, like maybe fought like 10 times a year total. That includes practices. And did that for 10 years. I took 10 years off. And I remember my first battle getting back into it. We had a field battle, again, like 40 on 40. And I was pretty fast, relatively athletic. And I remember I was like, I'm going to run around that unit, take a shot at their edge, and I'm going to get in their backfield. And I got in the backfield, and it was just utter chaos. I could not process what was going on. And I remember I happened to run into a friend of mine, a friend since high school, who'd been active all that time. And we ran into each other, and I froze, and he hit me in the body, and I died. And he asked later, he's like, why did you just leave your body open? I said, I could not process what was going on because it was just all happening so fast, which to him, it wasn't happening fast at all, you know, and he couldn't even understand what I was saying. So how do we train for this? Let me show you my number one favorite scenario, and it is actually a really popular scenario among the local fighters. And that's slide number 3. Sir Sivrid. There we go. So this is a broken field resurrection battle. So it doesn't have to be this exact format. I've got 2 others I'm going to show you. And I take I think it's 5/8 inch rope, and I just make little loops around the field. And people always ask, are they lakes or are they columns? And my answer is, it depends. Do you have archers or don't you? If you have archers, they're columns, because otherwise we just get shot up the whole time. Otherwise, and the whole reason why I make them lakes is just because it's easy. You don't have to worry about worry about if the sword's swinging over a rope or something like that. It's just really a way to sort of break up the field. And so this one, I'll just talk through what you see here. So in this one, you see 4 circles on the ground. There's outside borders. There's a resurrection point on the right side, which would be the red team's resurrection point. And there's a resurrection point on the left side. There's different ways to do this. One way to do it, now this way, typically what we do is 3 lives. And I've heard the phrase, King Ryu calls them 3 Marios, meaning if you've ever played Mario Brothers, it's after the 3rd death, you're done. So it's not 3 resurrections, it's 3 lives. So after the 3rd death, you're done. And what I like about this is that because you've got these little channels in here, it slows the battle down, and it allows people time to think about what's going on. And the nice thing is, you die, you go to your resurrection point, and then when you come back, you have very clear decisions to make. I get to the first circle. Do I go to the left side of the circle, or do I go to the right side of the circle? You stop. Even if you don't know what a good decision is, you're like, things are going pretty crazy on the left side. The right side looks like a guy like me could probably help out. And then they go in there and they make that decision. And then you see, let's say you're the white team, the red team, you see them adjust. You're like, oh, they're pulling into a kill pocket. What do I do now? The person next to me who has 3 years experience says, hold on. No, they don't say hold. Wait right here. They're going into a kill pocket. And then you're like, oh, kill pocket. I've heard that word before. So all these things kind of like allow you to start looking around, slow the fight down, see kind of positions you go into. If you go to slide number 4, I'll show you exactly what we did 2 weekends ago. It looks kind of like the flag from Brazil. And all this was we had just finished doing field battles in a field that was already drawn out into a giant square. People wanted to fight more, so I just threw 2 circles in the field. I put the res points in the corners. One team was on one side, one team was on the other side. This one was unlimited resurrection until people were done fighting. And we call this 100 minutes war rules. If you've ever been to 100 minutes war, it's you're counting kills. So whichever side gets the most kills is the side that wins. In this particular case, I told everybody that there was a magical invisible kill counter inside of each resurrection point that they can't see, meaning we're not actually going to count, but just pretend we're counting, like just try to, get kills without dying. And we actually had somebody that was volunteered to count. And we actually went to about 200 total kills in this battle. Like we got a lot of fighting. It was an average of 10 per side. My side won by a lot. I just want to throw that in there. And I actually had a brand new fighter who'd never done a melee before. He'd been about fighting for like 6 months, and he came up to me later and he said, I thought this was an amazing drill, amazing practice, because he said exactly what I just said to you guys. I go to the resurrection point, I come back, I've got some very clear decisions to make. And they also have the time, because if they're at the resurrection point, there's nobody around them to kill them. They stop and they look at the field, and they make whatever decisions they're capable of making. And then maybe you talk about it later, you say, oh, notice what happened when you went over to the muddy area, or notice what happened when you went over into the trees, or, look what happened when you went to the hill, or remember that one time you just ran into 2 knights and you died real quickly? Yeah, you stopped doing that, didn't you? And then I want to show a twist on this. This is the last slide. This is a chaotic one, and this is really good for. We talk about having your head on a swivel. This is really good for getting your head on a swivel. So this is just basically this one is. We had 3 circles in the middle of the field. This is just from a blog I read a while ago. This was the actual field setup that we had. So we had 3 circles in the field. So we have a resurrection point on the left side, resurrection point on the right side. And this one was we originally had a cone in the middle of the field, and we realized it was easier to put the cones out of bounds inside the circles and draw like a little triangle between the 3 of them. That way you're not knocking over something in the battlefield. So it was whenever we call hold, whichever side is occupying that triangle is the winner. So you're trying to run up there, take the cone, hold it. I'll just give you a little bit of background on what we've learned. I used to say 90 seconds, and then we would call hold. You can thank Sir Felix from Atlantia, a friend of mine, but someone who is such a strategist that he said, hey, let's not do anything for the first 60 seconds. And I said, okay, from now on, it is up to 2 minutes. We will call hold at a predetermined time between 20 seconds and 2 minutes. You don't know when it is. And then, because we want people to sort of grab the middle and try to fight for it. And what we found really nice about this one is, particularly if you look at that circle at the top of the screen, if people get around that circle, they literally get behind you if you're inside of that triangle. So you have to constantly look over your shoulder, have people communicate, tell you that someone's coming in behind you, and sort of react that way. So these are all really good drills to just kind of get someone on the field and getting used to having that head on a swivel, right? They're not just following the people in front of them. They're not just looking at the person in front of them. They're getting used to seeing the field and reading the field. Any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions?
No, so I mean, that's really the key on this, is that you're essentially reading the episode's on field awareness, and awareness in melees is different. You have to be aware of what is your, every time you stop, every time you can, if maybe you didn't die, maybe you're a commander like Louis, and you have to step back and take a good look and see what groups, if there's a reserve group, if somebody's pushing harder, and how deep they are on one side, how deep your unit is on the other side. These are scenarios where you have to read and understand. You can't just be single vision. Can't be just, if your job is the field, then your job is the field. If your job is the bridge, then your vision is the bridge, and communication to your commanders that are running the field. But, again, I think these exercise Barry shows here, everybody has a chance to think as they're resurrecting and coming in and make a decision. And that's all based on awareness of, hey, this side needs help, or this side is open and I can take advantage of it.
I got a quick comment. If you could throw up the first slide, the one that we looked at that had the different groups or the different advantage engagements.
Yeah, that'd be number 1. Yeah, number 1.
Or
Slide 2.
That one.
I'm sorry, the
Second.
other one, the one that had the circle, the group.
Oh, that
There
was the first one we saw. Sorry.
Yeah. So when I look at this, the field awareness lesson that I get here is that if we go from the right to the left, the one blue guy facing the three should know I'm skirmishing now. I'm taking three guys out of the fight. What do I need to do? And I need to distract these and make them chase me down. Typically, this is a knight, a royal peer, somebody who the average fighter wants to take him out of the battle very vigorously, and they can easily draw off three fighters. Now, to me, the way that I would read this, if I was the third white fighter on the right, I'd say two can easily deal with that blue guy. I should peel off and go to the weak end, which is down on the bottom, that sword and shield guy on the end, because the ends of the line are the weaknesses. And you can very easily get hyper focused on the guy in front of you. If he's hyper focused on the white fighter on the bottom there, you should be easily able to come over on the flank and at least get him a bit concerned, maybe back up. And now you help cover this exposed end of the line of the three white fighters that's getting folded up, because that's a big problem about to happen. Same thing with the top. If I'm the spear fighter on the bottom side there, I should think my other two, I want to press forward and I want to make that forward sword and shield guy back up. He backs up. Yeah. Now I turn and I go after the spear guy down there who's not even looking at me. And I don't need to go hit him, because that technically would not be engaged. But I can start shouting and make him panic and back up and fold that line in. So when I look at this from a field awareness, it's, and the four blue fighters on the bottom left should see that they're folding up. They basically have a kill pocket forming here, and they should be pressing forward and folding these guys in, because those dudes should be feeling a lot of heat, because they know they're outnumbered and more. There's no motion here, but I'm guessing the blue fighters pressing forward, they have momentum advantage, or should. And theoretically, the three blue fighters at the top should have momentum advantage on those two that they've isolated. But for me, the rule, and I like rules of engagement. I'm a big fan of Bulka's dicta of air combat from World War I. Like, if you do these things, stick to these steps, you will have an advantage. And that is, look for the ends of lines and start putting pressure on them, because it's easy to get somebody at the end of the line to panic when they realize they're being flanked. And you have to get legal engagement. You can't just go up and blindside hit them, but you can go up, tap them, get in their face. If the white spear fighter here, right in the middle of the graphic, if the spear fighter ran up body to body, like bad breath range, that dude would probably freak out. Couldn't really hit him, but he would know that the blue polearm, I assume that's a polearm fighter there with yeah, he should be open season now. That would be him rushing in and finishing that dude off. Yeah, these are a pin and envelop kind of approach out there in the East.
Yeah, these are not lacrosse players; they are polearms.
Right, exactly. That's kind of what I figured.
But I want to add a little bit to that.
When I think, just let me wrap up. When I think of field engagement and looking around, those are some of the key things to look at. Am I pressing the advantage? Am I not? What is the advantage? End of the line is an advantage. But like you said, very early on, press any advantage. If you have it, you press it.
Yeah.
Right. I want to add a couple specific words to that. What we're looking for when we're looking at the field is what opportunity is there, and with what resources do we have? And that compares against your opponent's opportunities to resources ratio. And there is a time cost between who's capitalizing on that and who's not. So the longer this goes, the more it costs if you're not getting there first. So there's a way to describe this that I sometimes refer to as stick seconds. So how much time do you have weapons directly attacking somebody for every person who has a weapon that is attacking for a second, whoever has that larger number is the side that's winning.
So, for
So,
example, the three white fighters over there, if they're actually attacking, they have a 3-1 on blue, so they're winning. Is that how you'd kind of describe that?
Right. So, and if it was 10 seconds worth, that's 30-10.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I had a problem I run into in singles right now, because again, my main focus for the longest time was melee, is and in fact, the fight that I lost in our tournament, it was a single elimination for me, and I lost to one of my friends. And I realized after we did it, I was focused too much on trying to kill him now rather than letting the fight develop. And that comes from my melee experience of, I got stuff to do, I got stuff to accomplish. It's rare that I'm in a situation where I'm less experienced than people, because I'm old. I've been around for a while. And I've got a spear. I usually have a job to do. And so a friend of mine that I grew up with, I came from a team sports background. He came from a wrestling background, so an individual sport background. And I remember, like I said, I tend to press too hard, too fast in singles. And his problem in melee was that he was looking for these one-on-one situations and just drawing them out, and he would just take forever. He would get like somebody that was like way below his ability level and draw him out on the side and have this like really long battle. And like, by the time he was done, the rest of us were done fighting, so I think to the point you're making there is like, if you have a 3-on-1, you got to finish that fast. You're being tied up. So you find those advantages and capitalize on them as quickly as you can. What do we got going on here?
It's funny too. And let me just jump in with this, and that's something I noticed from the gaming realm. What they'll call that is overmatch. Just realize when your portion of the field has overmatch, you have to exploit it. You cannot sit there and wait or dilly-dally around when you have the advantage. You have to capitalize on it.
And I think that's what Louis is covering with the idea of essentially, stick time, number of sticks on number of people.
A good way to put numbers to it.
Yep. So let's just talk. What? Oh, no, go ahead.
Just one more comment. In rapier melee, things tend to devolve into a line battle. But if you die and you're coming back and you're looking for where do I go, look for openings and holes in a line. Look for corners to hit. Look for places of high opportunity value.
Yep. I think that pretty much covers lots of both rattan and rapier, really. Just because it's fundamentally, the idea is attack the weaknesses as hard as you can and try to take advantage of them. So, all right, let's talk about some drills maybe that we can cover. And I think, Tristan, you want to cover real quick. Let's jump back to tournament for 1 second. You want to cover, and let's actually, we can cover this, how do marshals affect this, right? Not only does that cover tourney, but it actually covers melees as well if holds are called. So,
yes.
Why don't you guys talk about that?
Yeah, if we could bring up that first video where the two boxers are drilling in the ring. Sirvid's doing a great job tonight, by the way, pulling up all these videos. We're kind of pushing pushing
maybe a sec on that one.
Yeah, he needs a second on that one. He had.
That's okay.
I can give you the Chavez one.
What I wanted to bring up. Yeah, what I wanted to bring up was, and I've seen this happen many times, where marshals can actually affect the fight because they see a fighter approaching the rope and they'll call a hold and they'll recenter. Where what I wanted to point out was with the video that we were watching earlier, where you had the two boxers drilling and they were in the middle of the ring, or one was in the middle of the ring, one was kind of getting pressured against the ropes. Imagine what happens if the ref would just say, all right, stop, everybody center up every few seconds. Well, now the fighter that's applying the pressure is actually applying a tactic. It's not really a safety issue, but the fight is being stopped and his tactic is being negated because they're recentering the fight every time. Now, having been a marshal and been Earl Marshal of a kingdom, the whole thing, there are times when if a fighter goes rushing towards the ropes and it looks like he's going to blast through the ropes into the crowd, absolutely you have to call a hold. If he gets tangled up in the ropes, absolutely you have to call a hold, because you don't want, the list ropes getting overrun and people getting hit or whatnot. But to recognize when you see something more like what you're seeing in this video, which is you're seeing range control being applied here. This is not going to be, even if you imagine them as sword and shield fighters or two sword fighters or what have you, when they start getting close to the ropes, and you can tell an opponent who knows he's close to the ropes, he knows where he is in the field, but he's not exiting the list field by going through the ropes. So that a smart, seasoned marshal will know and be able to appreciate that there's a range and pressure game going on here, and he should not call a hold to recenter it, because that is actually taking away the tactic that the fighters are using. And maybe, the fighter that's going up close to the ropes, maybe that's part of his tactic. Who knows? But you're kind of supplanting the fighters being able to just fight their fight by stepping in and calling a hold and recentering. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Brian,
Yeah, I mean,
think I
the big
described
key
that
is
decently.
Yeah, the big key on that is you can see even here, if you overpressure and step too hard on somebody, there's no space to go. And at some point, you're going to push them into the list line. Like here, it's fine. They can work on the ropes. For us, you get that close, the person is solid still. At some point, they're going to try to escape, and there's tanglement happening, and it gets marshals really concerned. But,
right.
The other problem with getting too close to somebody is you can swamp your own. Not only are you swamping maybe his weapons, but your own. In other words, you're too close. You can't swing. You can't do things. The key is to slow down as you're attacking them. Smaller steps as they're getting closer to the ropes. And then here, he's off the ropes. He still has a tiny bit of space to move, but he doesn't have a lot of room to move. But you notice he's not pressing straight into him and pushing him back into the ropes. He's going to take small advantages of here and try to just control the exact distance and take advantage of it. This is the kind of scenario. Go ahead.
Point out something here too. The person against the ropes, when they're panicking, they're tending to keep their feet wide and lateral to the ropes so that they have an exit strategy, because they can't exit back. They can't really exit forward. So they have to exit side to side. So they'll keep their legs wider. But that also, the person who's in the middle is suppressing their ability to go in and out, because he's sort of forcing them into that lateral stance most of the time. So, and then they maintain this in and out so they can get these lots of little jabs in there with this ability to go in and out, because he's got this more linear stance, and the other person really can't reply with the same.
Right, because he can actually bounce in. Go
ahead. Robert's got a very good question here. How do we train marshals and inform observers that there is an area beyond the rope, which is called the splash zone?
That's a great
educating
question,
marshals. It is a great question. Educating marshals on it is a crucial thing. And my suggestion would be, don't try to do it in the middle of a fight. That's not the time to educate marshals. It needs to be done by the marshal in charge, briefing the marshals that day of what's going to be expected, and go over it. Don't assume everybody's on the same page. Just say, hey, listen, we're going to have a tournament today. Here's the sides of the list field. Here's, where the observers are going to be, because some rooms are more compressed and they have, people almost walking right up to the ropes, or whether there's a good amount of area outside the ropes, and to say, here's what we need to do for safety. Usually the way I would do it would be brief the marshals and say, if you see that you've got a couple of good technicians, let them fight their fight unless something looks like it's, going outside of the control. If you get somebody who's, we used to have polearm fighters that were notorious for this, where they would go running backwards, have no idea where the list ropes were, and they'd go right through them. And then it was all right. Now the marshals need to say, okay, we need to watch this very carefully, and they would usually put a marshal behind that fighter so they could act as a physical barrier and be able to, with a marshaling staff, stop them from outrunning the list field. But it's one of those things where, as long as they're aware that, of course, out of control things can happen, but generally, if you get fairly skilled, competent fighters that know their ring craft and know the space, you can give them the latitude to, and only stop a fight if it does tangle in a rope or the rope actually starts to get moved. But let them get close to it. If they know what they're doing, they can be close to it. It's up to the fighters to manage their navigation in the ring or in the list.
I will occasionally let that marshal staff just touch their back gently if they're getting up against the ropes rather than try to stop them.
Right.
Yep. So the big piece on this one is if you're running straight at somebody and they're running straight back, at some point, if they can stop or not. That's when you as fighters also call hold. So watch how hard you press. The idea is to press them, give them some room to stabilize themselves, slow down, and then press them again, push them into that edge where they know the ropes behind them. And now it's really on them if they run into the rope. Also, the people behind them start seeing that, hey, I have to back off a little bit if they're standing on the line. And the marshal has time to get over there and evaluate if, again, you don't have momentum going backwards anymore. So it's much easier to stay off the rope.
Another way that I would train this too, and back in the day when we had more incidents of fighters running backwards into and through the ropes, unfortunately we didn't do this. I was a very young fighter at this point, but it would help to set up ropes at your practice and actually train them how to sense when they are close to them. And so they don't just
let's talk about this. I just posted a video. Sivert, can you post that last link I threw out there? Tristan, I had just did something last night. We were talking, and I wanted to test some mics on my remote microphones that we'll be using hopefully for some training. But you can see I put cones on the ground. A little harder to see, but now you really have to understand where those are. And the idea here was to practice traveling along the edge of the rope, staying even with the person. And then not only did we do that, and here's where we're going to start. So he's understanding right where that back edge is, and now we're just rolling that edge, and then we're staying in front, and we're just practicing stopping on each edge. And we don't need to look where those cones are. At first you do. Later you can start kind of getting a feel. You start getting used to the comfortability. He's looking where his feet are and where his distance is, right? And so we start learning that. Okay. Speed up a little bit. I didn't actually get all of these. The next thing we worked on was actually kind of pushing backwards, and then I would stop at the back of the list. And so he pushed me back. I'd stop at the back of the list, and then I'd run the back of the list where the cones were. And then see, here's where he's stopping. And then we're going to go back to back. We're practicing kind of understanding where those cones are. And he stopped a little short. We talked about it. I stopped right. There's one right behind me. You guys can't see. But we're just practicing understanding where the field was. And then later, as we go forward a little bit more, you're going to see us run diagonals. And see, now we're running diagonals. And we're stopping where those diagonals are. So we're really starting to understand how that list field works and where the borders of that list field are. This scenario here, and then after this, we can start looking at doing a little bit of shadow work and things like that in there, and really start getting used to see we're kind of running circles here a little bit and staying inside that list.
One thing that I'm noticing that I'm hoping everybody else does too, is that even though the fighter in the green tunic, you see him back up to the line and then stop. Notice that Bronis is also pressing forward and then stopping. So he's not forcing the other fighter to know where that line is exactly, because he's also mirroring the stop. And if this were a full actual sparring fight or a full fight, Bronis is showing the responsibility of not driving his opponent through that rope by keeping pressing forward.
Right.
So you can see there that we're shadow boxing a little bit. Yeah. He's trying to cut off corners and so on. Go ahead, Louis.
So every time we do sparring, whether I'm doing armored or rapier or indoors, outdoor, whatever, I'm always trying to manage the fight. So if I see another fight going on beside us or behind us, I'm trying to turn the fight. I'm trying to control the fight the entire time. I work with the people who are fighting around us. I work with the obstacles around us, but I'm always trying to steer the direction of where I want the fight to be. It's just a conscious thing that goes on the entire time I'm doing sparring. So that's something that you can add to improve your awareness on what's going on. And while I'm looking at my opponent, I'm also trying to be conscious of my peripheral, and I'm trying to pay attention to their feet, trying to pay attention to the sides, trying to see other things while I'm looking at them. I'm not just existing in the fight. I'm trying to manage that fight and where it's at.
All right. So this is some ideas in melee. The key in melee is that you can also practice drills. We do a drill in melee where we essentially we break the teams up. If we try to at least create a team of 4 people, and we change the commander every time. We have 4 on each side. We engage before everybody's really dead, and this starts breaking up into one-on-ones. We call a hold. We stop, and we talk about, okay, what were you trying to do? What were you trying to do? What happened? And, what would you do differently if you knew that there was going to be, who did you put on who based on weapon type or strength? And then next group would come up. We pick another commander. These commanders may not even know the commands because they're so new yet. But the idea is they really get a chance to start practicing making decisions and learning from their decisions.
Yeah, Brant, I want to touch on that because that's I'm a big fan of that. And that's not to say that like having, organizational structure within an army isn't also important. Like sometimes your job is to do what you're told for the sake of the unit. But I've seen 2 extremes. In my 30 years of fighting, I've seen people that can't make any decisions because they've always only ever done what they were told. They've never been put in a position where they can make decisions. I'm here on the wall. I stand between Louis and Brandos. I charge when they say charge. I stay the line when they say stay the line. That's all I know how to do. And I've seen the opposite side of that. I was oddly enough, a melee organization where there wasn't a lot of unit structure, at least to a time period. And it was just a ball of chaos on the field and a bunch of people running around and just never getting better at anything. And I kind of like to see, a little bit of the in-between, a little bit of everything. Like you said, you put people in different scenarios and have them make decisions. Some of the scenarios I went through, I like having a combination of, like you said, the one scenario was really slow and drawn out. You go back to the res point, you come back in, this battle goes on for 10 minutes. You have all these chances to make mistakes and learn. And the other one was 90 seconds of fighting, hold the middle, people are going to run around from behind you, engage from behind, and it's like complete chaos and everything in between to sort of get the different levels of, I just read in a book, it's talking about like that sweet spot of being just beyond your level of comfortability, like just beyond, that challenge. That's my thought on that. So.
No, I think I found that we had a lot of brand new people. And by doing this, to tell you the truth, it covered, and Louis was around through that period. It really covered and helped our melee unit make up for real practical experience with people willing to make decisions. Right? They didn't override decisions, but if there was nobody there, they would make decisions and people would follow them. Yeah.
We had what was it, the saying, see something, say something, but Bess was on that show. She's like, Barry, I think that means something different. It's like that's stuff you're supposed to report to HR. It's like, no, it's more like the mid realm's doing something. Just letting you guys know.
And the melee application is you have to be able to see it first. If you're not paying attention, you don't see it. You won't be able to make any kind of a call.
Yeah.
Another small drill that we do is a reform drill where we line up people in a circle, everybody faces out.
Oh, we do that one.
Right. And then we give everybody a call sign Maybe sometimes it's one person with one and 18 people with another. Sometimes it's half and half, whatever. And then they on lay-on, they turn around and they got to figure out who their partners are on the team.
Yeah, we don't do that enough. That's, oh man, we had a lot of fun when we did that.
That's a great one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It adds a little confusion and, forces you to try and figure things out.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah,
kind
and
of like that picture I showed you where it's like you have to make quick decisions. Oh, we've got 2 spears against 1 shield. What do we do? And it's like, start throwing shots until he starts running at us and then get the hell out of there,
Yep.
And then the communication, you're running around going like, whatever, blue team, east, mid, whatever like your call sign is. And then you form up into your groups. Then you have to start going like, oh, there's 5 of us against 3 of them. Let's do something. The 3's going like, ooh, we better find at least 2 more people to go join up with. So, man, are we like out of time? Good Lord.
Yeah, we actually are. Let's just kind of cover the last little bit and give everybody a chance to talk. We kind of covered 2 things here. I have a feeling we could probably have broke both out separately and added
probably
more drills and things like that. And maybe something we do in the future. I pulled enough stuff on the single side of that I will be at least doing a short video and just post it up. It probably won't be a live one, but I'll post something up on some drills around understanding how to use and fight inside the list field that way. So, and cover a bunch of stuff there. It might be something, Barry, you might think about the same thing with some of your drills that you have and put them out there so people have a chance to see them. I will post some of the notes I took out there as well in this video after it's up on YouTube. So,
All right, awesome.
Louis, you got anything that you wanted to cover? I know we were kind of covering a lot, right?
Yeah, I think we touched on a lot of, small pieces. The biggest thing for awareness is to get in the practice of trying to become more aware by observing the things around you. Really, by practicing at practice in fights, trying to make sure that your opponent's not running into the wall or another set of fighters. That's a great way to really practice that.
Barry, got anything?
I got nothing. I was the host of the show, so we got to do everything I wanted. We got to do everything I wanted to do.
Well, hopefully you learned a little bit, got some ideas on the single side.
By the way, I've actually got something for us after we go offline. If you guys can hang around for a bit.
Okay, sounds good. How about Tristan?
Super secret coaches discussion.
That
Yeah,
covered. Yeah, there we go.
I just wanted to lastly pipe in with an idea, something that I find helpful, or I found helpful, especially coaching people through, is when, especially within a single combat scenario, is don't watch with your focal point of vision, like looking at somebody's feet and then looking at their hand or their shoulder. Use your peripheral vision to watch their movement. It calms you quite a bit. It allows you to be distracted less than if you lead with your eyes. People will call it the 1,000-yard stare, but using your peripheral vision calms your vision and allows you to watch a lot more, take in a lot more. It takes some practice to get to, but you'll find it will help lower your stress level, at least once you get more confident with it. And that's a big part of using your vision. I also used it on the melee field, just to get a handle on what's going on with a quick scan of your head without making your eyes just dart everywhere looking for specifics. So, but a lot of great stuff. I agree with Bronis. I think we could have turned this into 2 episodes or maybe even 3, but I would definitely encourage watch the video. We'll post the link, or watch the videos that we put here, because there's some great detail in there that we did not cover with this. So hopefully everybody enjoyed the show.
All right. We signing off?
No, not yet. So going into next week or 2 weeks from now, we're going to try to put the second second part up of the fear episode that we did.
Oh, that's
we did
right.
A nice conversation about it. This time, I think we're going to try to jump into some details, specifically types of fear and how to maybe deal with those things or live with them if you have to. But we want to just get a little bit more detailed on the specific ones. So that one, I just have to work with Helga and make sure that we have the stuff together to put it all up. But
Make sure
also trying
nobody's in England, nobody's in Australia, nobo's in
yes. Well, and they're all just back from Australia and bringing that one up. I'm going to try to get the folks that went over to Australia for Roni Fest to maybe jump online and talk about it, because it sounded like I got a chance to read everything that was going on, and it sounded like it was incredible. And a number of our coaches that were part of this group went to it, so I would actually love to hear how it went for them. So I'll try to get with Sean and a few others and see if they may put a show together.
That'd be great.
But other than that, that's about it. I'd like to thank everybody out there. Thanks, Barry, for being the host. I always love throwing you on there because you're so uncomfortable. But you do a great show.
I love being the host on shows that you're on, because if I just don't feel like being the host, you'll just take over anyway.
You did a great job. I love the stuff you do. So
shit. Sorry, Robert just pointed out something. I'm totally I didn't have my mask on. Now everybody knows I'm Batman. Sorry.
Oh, that's why
wait.
I didn't even think of
Wait, hold on. Now I'm in disguise. Now you don't know who I am.
Oh, now you're Superman. All right, folks. Thank you very much for showing up for the show. Everybody be careful out there. Get some practice in. Get those drills in. And remember, what you do quite often is what you do when you go out there on the field. So keep that practice going.
All right,
Thanks,
awesome.
everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a great night.
Night.